Hi and welcome to today. I'm Amanda and I'm taking you on my 31 days of essential tools and supplies. My essential tools and supplies may be different from yours, but today we're going to be playing with. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to today. I'm so glad that you could join me, and today, as you can see, we're talking about buttons. So, buttons? I hear you asking yourself, why are we talking about buttons? Now, is buttons a resource? Yes, they are. Now, I've got a load of buttons. I've probably got more than this in another container somewhere. I've always collected buttons as from young, and I guess we're not from young. I guess where it started was after my father passed away in '92. So we're going back like 20 odd years. Going through a lot of his stuff, I found he had a sewing machine. At the time, I was doing art, but I was just drawing. I didn't know anything about mixed media. And I found a sewing machine, which I gave away, and I could kick myself to this day. It was like one of those singers, the old time. Anyway, so the other things he had was buttons, and what I kept was some of the sewing stuff that he had, and then over the years I've collected myself. Now, brought my sewing machine, brought another sewing machine, and I utilise buttons in my art projects. I very rarely, I don't think I've ever used any of my buttons to stitch onto clothing. Maybe if, you know, somebody else has said, oh, have you got a black button or whatever, I can say, okay, yeah, here's. But I've never used any of these in clothing. I use them when I'm creating journals, or if I'm creating my figures, I might add to them, or if I'm creating fabric beads, you know, I use them as embellishments as opposed to their functional use. And you can get so many different pretty types of buttons, and it's really nice to, I find it really nice to be able to use them in that way, in a creative way. And so one of the things, so looking at if you were going to, or looking for something creative to do, but that was not creative, in the sense that you didn't want to start sewing anything or stitching anything, sorting is one of the things I find relaxing and therapeutic. So one of the projects you can see I did was to sort them into their colours, because I've brought them, the buttons I brought in different contexts, and they've come from different sources. So I would have to have sorted them. And so I found a storage system that holds these boxes that works for me. The only thing is that I can't see them all, so maybe further down the line there may be something else that I utilise, but that doesn't take up a lot of space. So one of the things I did was colour coordinate, colour sort them in their rough colours, and I wanted to go even further, but it was just like having the space. They took up too much space, so like I would have broken down these further into like the pale pinks. Well, we've got kind of the pale pinks here, but you know, broken this down, but I'm not worried about that now. But that might be something that if I wanted to take my mind off things, again, sorting is something that helps me to just unwind, relax, and well, not necessarily unwind, but think things through. Doing something that doesn't take effort, while I can think of something, like while I can be doing something with my hands that doesn't take effort, but whilst I'm thinking about something that I really need to work out. Anyway, so as I said, they came from different sources. Some were a giveaway in, I've spoken about magazines, some magazines do giveaways, and I brought a few of those magazines, and these particular buttons that are in here, the what's that? Santora's Gorgeous. Yeah, for gorgeous project ideas from Docraft or Docraft. Anyway, so these buttons were really pretty, and as I said, I would use them on projects, which I will show you. So some were giveaways, some I brought as some were collected from back in the day. So a lot of the black buttons, I don't know, my dad had loads of black buttons and I just kept them. Some are from my clothes that were buttons that I liked. So and those would mainly be the jean type buttons. So these particular metal buttons that you get on some clothing, what I would do was cut them off, and especially where there's lots, you know, in a particular item of clothing, that I know that on a project, having a few of them that you can, you know, kind of incorporate with something else. And I'll show you these ones. I had loads of these, so I'll show you what I did with those. Oops. And then some I would go into my second-hand store and I would buy an item of clothing just for the buttons. So let me show you some of these. They're so pretty. I just love them. And I haven't yet found a use, but they're metal, and some of them are. Is that? We've got that one there already. Oh yeah, this one. Ooh, I'm gonna have to zoom in for this for you. Okay, so these particular buttons are ones that were on items of clothing, and there was 4 of those. You know? 3. Anyway, doesn't matter. And I would buy an item of clothing just for the buttons, and I know that there's a project waiting for, say, this particular look, or whether it's a, you know, again, I don't reuse the buttons on clothing, but on an art journal or a figure, or incorporating it in some way, that's how I would use it. Okay, so, and then the other way that I've collected the buttons is that some, like you can go to the dollar store or any one of these other smaller stores, some of them will sell bags of buttons, and they sell mainly, it's the bags of buttons you'd probably get are like these particular ones. So I know these particular ones I've got in bags. These big ones as well, yeah. So the big ones, the pinks, the colour, the yellows, and so you would find them. And even in these, you get some really pretty buttons that you can maybe utilise in a project. And I do have some favourites. Like this just reminds me of summer. These yellow ones, it just reminds me. I don't know. As a child, I don't know what it is about this particular, but when I look at this, it just reminds me of back, you know, being back as a child. And then the other things I wanted to show you was how unusual some of the buttons. So in the packets, I'll show you, let me see, you just get a random selection of buttons that are really pretty, and so it's definitely worthwhile even that, even going through them. So it's definitely worthwhile. You know, you'll find the odd ones that are just unusual. And I don't even know if that's a button, but it was in the buttons. But there's loads of them, so there's loads that I can potentially use. You know, maybe even use with my glue gun. All different colours. Actually, I might just put them. That's what I might do. I might just put all of these together, because I would probably utilise them in a project. Yes. You see? So that's something I'm going to do. And like, so these were from one of those packets. And again, this has got some interesting type buttons. So this for me is an essential, because I utilise the buttons in my creative projects, and I'll show you what I've done. So I would use it in my fabric journals. So I showed you these little, let's just move some of these out of the way so we can get in there. So you've seen this particular journal because I've used it over the in some of the other projects. So I just, you know, I wanted to create a fabric journal. I wanted to have something that I just love the feel in my hand. I love the size, and so I, you know, just arrange the buttons. I've put buttons here, I put bead in here, and this is how I would use the buttons. I'd use them in a creative project like this. I haven't used any of the colours yet, and I've used some other colourful beads, but as I said, that's one way I would use them. And then this is another journal. This is my sewing journal, and it's got some sewing bits and pieces in the front, a crochet needle, and the pages are fabric, and I can either do some stitching. It's got some extra bits of fabric here that if I wanted to, you know, take this with me, there's little projects that I can do in them. I think I showed this on my 31 journals, and I've got these threads as well, and I've got a really fine crochet needle. Like this particular crochet needle, it is a, what number is it? 3.25 millimeters. I've got an even smaller one that I would use as well, and you can crochet little flowers that then I could use in a project. So this is a kit all in itself that I would use, but as you can see, some of the buttons I've kind of alternated on here and just kind of done a random spread just to decorate, and it works for me. So buttons. Is that a song? Tuppence a bag, buttons, buttons. But I think she was talking about flowers, wasn't she? Anyway. Okay, so that's one of the things that you can use with your buttons. You can stitch with them as you would normally, or you can use them in creative projects. And what I don't have is my fabric beads. But again, you know, you can make fabric beads and adorn them with buttons, especially the smaller ones. They look quite cute. So yeah, these are my buttons, and I hope that that might have been some help for you in terms of thinking about what you can do with your supplies and different ways of using them. You might have some buttons sitting around, you know, just waiting to be utilised, and they're weird. These buttons are weird because they don't even have a back, see, but they're heavy, so I would use them I'd probably, you know, glue gun them to something. Anyway, yeah, so I hope this has been of help, and I hope that you it sparks it inspires you in some way to utilise what you have in your stash, and, you know, really kind of think about using them in a different way. and have loads of fun, and also get you out of a slump if you're in a creative slump, or if you just, you know, you've got a short amount of time. And I found that as a carer, you have short amount of time, really, you know, and the idea of being able to spend some time focusing on something for yourself, you need to be able to snatch the time. You're not going to get hours of time unless you can get somebody to, you know, help you out. But for most carers, they're not. Anyway, they're not able to. So being able to have some small bite-sized pieces of time that you can utilise is the way to go. So yeah, I hope this has been informative, and I look forward to seeing your projects. And please do leave a comment. You can even link to wherever it is you put your project up, and I'll take a look. And subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye then.